Hi there, welcome to Please Sleep channel. If you're here, you're probably looking for something boring enough to lull you into unconsciousness. And lucky for you, there's nothing more sleep-inducing than the brutal reality of everyday life in the Roman Empire. Let's be clear, this isn't the glamorous Rome from movies. There are no slow-motion gladiators. No emperors giving dramatic speeches on marble steps. No orgies, well, not for you. Anyway, you're not Caesar. You're not even one of the interesting senators who gets stabbed in the back. You're most likely a nobody. A poor farmer, a tired mother of 6, a slave working in a mine, or maybe just a guy selling bad fish sauce in a loud, dirty market. You don't have a statue. You don't have property. You don't even have shoes. The streets of Rome are not majestic stone pathways. They are crowded, filled with noise, waste, animals, angry vendors. And sometimes little poop. There are no weekends, no labor unions, no social mobility. You work until your body gives up, and then you still have to pay taxes. Your diet, mostly mush, barley porridge, lentils, maybe olives if it's a special day. Meat, forget it. Wine, sure, if you like it watered down and filled with strange floating things. You might think, well, at least they had advanced aqueducts and Roman baths. Yeah, they did, and none of that is for you fetch water from a public fountain that smells like sadness. You bathe once a month, if that, and you share a toilet sponge with about 30 strangers. Medicine is a joke. Got a fever? Try praying to Apollo. Injured in battle? Here's a stake to bite on. Toothache? Hope you like pliers. You're taxed whether you own something or not. You can be arrested without her. Reason? You can be flogged in the street. And if you complain, the system assumes you're lying because you're poor, and poor people lie. Still think you'd make it. That you could grind your way up. That's adorable. You don't get a hero's journey in Rome. You get a slow, painful, smelly routine every day until you drop dead at age 35. And that's if you're lucky. So get comfortable. We're about to walk slowly and painfully through everything that made life in the Roman Empire so unpleasant. This is boring history, and this is why you would last a day in the Roman Empire. You wake up in the Roman Empire. It sounds impressive, majestic even, but it isn't. Not for you. You're not a general. You're not a senator. You're not even a merchant. You're probably a peasant, or worse, a slave. You don't have a villa. You don't have silk robes or golden coins. You have one tunic. It smells like you're a goat. You don't own the goat. You don't own anything. You live in a small, dark hut made of wood, straw, and hope. It leaks when it rains. It's cold in winter. It's hot in summer. You sleep on a mat, if you're lucky. You wake up before the sun. Not because you want to. Because work starts when it's dark, and if you're late, someone hits you. You eat a handful of barley mush. Again, it tastes like wet dirt. Sometimes you add olive oil if you can afford it. You usually can't. You don't get coffee. You don't get eggs. You don't get a choice. There is no breakfast menu. You don't even get breakfast. It's just food, if it can be called that. You walk outside and step into mud or dust, or both. You walk barefoot because sandals are expensive. If you own sandals, you save them for religious festivals. You don't get to rest. You don't get to think. You work. Maybe you're a farmer. That means you bend over fields, pulling weeds, sowing seeds, cutting grain, holding water. The tools are heavy. The sun burns your neck. The hours blur. Your hands crack. Your back aches. You might get a break for lunch, which is more barley. Or lentils. Maybe a fig, once in a while. You hear stories of Rome's greatness. Roads, aqueducts, baths. They sound wonderful. They are not yours. You've never seen a road. You live in a village. Your road is a dirt path between rocks. No pavement. No milestones. You don't travel. You die where you're born. The aqueduct doesn't reach your home. It feeds fountains in town. You carry water in a clay jug, uphill. It spills, you slip. You do it again. The bathhouse is in town too, but you don't go there. It costs money. You wash in a river, if there is one. If it's not full of animals, or corpses, or sewage. You come back home at dusk. You're tired, but there's still work. You patch the roof, feed the chickens, fix a basket, stir a pot. You don't sit. You don't reflect. You exist. You eat again. The same food. It's cold now. You sleep early, because candles cost money. The firewood is damp. Smoke fills the hut. You cough. You roll over. And then you do it all again tomorrow. This is your life. But let's say you're not a peasant. Let's say you're a slave. That's worse. You have no name. You are called boy or girl or it. You wake up in a cell, or on a cold floor. You work until your hands bleed. If you stop, you're whipped. If you disobey, you're beaten. If you run, you're branded or crucified. You might serve in a house, or in the fields, or in the mines. Especially the mines. They are death pits, hot, deep, toxic. Miners don't live long. You breathe dust. Your eyes sting. You pray for a collapse, just to end it. But no one hears, because no one cares. You are not a person. You are a tool. If you're a woman, you might serve in the kitchen, or the bedroom. There is no consent, no escape. No one defends you. Your pain is invisible. You might have a child. That child is not yours. It belongs to your master. It might be sold. It might be ignored. You might never see it again. If you cry, work faster. If you collapse, get up. If you die, you're replaced. If, by some miracle, you are freed, you become a freedman. Congratulations. You are now only slightly above worthless. People still see you as a slave. You can't marry into good families. You can't hold public office. You can't forget, because they won't let you. But maybe, just maybe, you're not a slave. You're a citizen, a free man. You're still miserable. You still pay taxes. You still get drafted. You still have no power. You don't vote. Not really. You attend assemblies and yell with hundreds of other poor men. While rich men pull strings behind the curtain, the republic is gone. It's the empire now. The emperor rules everything. His word is law. If he's mad, you die. If he's bored, you die. If he forgets you exist, you might live. So you keep your head down. You hope for rain. You fear plague. You avoid soldiers. You avoid tax collectors. You try not to speak when they're near. Because if they ask questions, you answer wrong. And if you answer wrong, you disappear. You've heard of gladiators. You think they're heroes. They are not. They are slaves with swords. They fight to survive. Most don't. The arena is blood and sand. The cheers don't feed them. The crowds don't care. You don't care either. You go to watch them die because it's free. The emperor gives you games and bread. You forget your hunger for a moment. Then you go home and eat barley dot again. This is the Roman Empire. It is powerful. It is vast. It is rich. But you are not. You are small. Replaceable. Forgotten. And you wouldn't last a day. So let's say you survive your first day in the Roman Empire. That's impressive. Most people don't. But now you're wondering about citizenship. You've heard it comes with perks. Maybe it gets you out of the mud. Maybe you get to vote. Maybe people finally stop kicking you. Well, bad news. You're not a citizen. Most people aren't. You're either a slave, a freedman, or a provincial peasant who pays taxes but gets none of the privileges. Roman citizenship is exclusive. You don't earn it easily. You're born into it. Or you buy it if you somehow have money, which you don't. Or you serve 25 years in the military, assuming you survive long enough to remember your own name. If you're a slave, you're not a person. You're property. You can be sold, traded, beaten, or killed at will. You don't speak in court. You don't inherit anything. If you invent something, it's not yours. If you fall in love, good luck. If your master says no, that's it. If you have a child, it's their property too. There are no weekends, no sick days, and no hope. Slavery in Rome isn't based on race. It's based on conquest. Anyone can be enslaved. Greeks, Gauls, Africans, Syrians, even other Romans. If your city loses the war, you become cargo. You're dragged to a market, examined like livestock, and auctioned to the highest bidder if you cry. They ignore you if you scream. They gag you if you fight. They break you, and if you obey perfectly for years, you might be freed. And then you become a freedman, which means you get a new status, permanent reminder. You're legally free but socially marked. Everyone calls you libertas, a reminder you used to belong to someone. You can own property, but you can't run for office. You can marry, but good families won't marry you. You can start a business, but no one respects it. You can have children, and they might do better. That's your only consolation, not that you live to see it. Let's say you're born free, but you're poor. You're still excluded. The law favors the rich. It always has. You don't have a lawyer. You can't afford bribes. You can't write letters to senators. You don't even know how to write. If someone accuses you of a crime, you stand in front of a magistrate in silence while the other guy pays witnesses to lie. If you're lucky, they just fine you. If you're unlucky, they whip you in the forum. In public. In front of everyone you know. You bleed, you cry. No one helps. The guards laugh. Then they drag you away. And the magistrate goes to lunch. If you're a woman, your status is even more complicated. You can be free. You can be married. But you are always someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's property. You can't vote. You can't speak in the assembly. You can't run for office. Your job is to produce children and hope you don't die doing it, which you might. Roman childbirth is a gamble. No anesthesia, no sanitation, No antibiotics, just pain, blood, and crossed fingers. If the baby lives, you raise it with whatever energy you have left. If it dies, you bury it and try again. Some women die in their teens, some in their 20s. A few reach old age. You might think rich women had it better. In some ways, yes. They had servants, education, better food. But they were still controlled. Their marriages were arranged. Their behavior was monitored. Their bodies were state property, designed to carry on family lines and political alliances. If they spoke out, they were shamed. If they cheated, they were exiled or worse. Their worth was tied to their purity, their obedience, and their ability to produce male heirs. Not joy, not love. Just production. Let's go back to citizenship. What did it actually get you? Some legal protections. You could own land. You could appeal decisions. You couldn't be crucified usually, but these privileges only mattered if you had power. Most citizens were still poor, still hungry, still ignored. You got to vote, but your vote barely counted. The assemblies were rigged. The rich voted first. Their votes weighed more. By the time it got to you, the decision was made. You could run for office, but only if you had money. You could be a soldier, but you were expected to die quietly. You could file lawsuits, but only if you could afford paperwork and knew Latin. You could travel freely across the empire, but you didn't have a horse. You walked slowly, tired, with blisters. Even as a citizen, Rome didn't serve you. It tolerated you, until it didn't. One bad harvest, one plague, one political shift, and your citizenship meant nothing. You could be arrested, exiled, or killed. The emperor didn't need a reason. His mood was law. You didn't question him. You didn't mention his name loudly. You didn't joke about him at dinner. People disappeared for less. The emperor could grant citizenship to entire cities. He could revoke it too. He could empty the treasury, raise taxes, declare war, or marry his horse and you. You watched, powerless, silent, obedient. And let's not forget the provinces. If you lived in Gaul, Hispania, Egypt, or Judea, you were not Roman by default. You were a subject. You paid taxes. You hosted legions. You adopted Latin names and Roman gods. But you didn't belong. You were a barbarian with a Roman disguise. The empire saw you as a resource. Your land, your grain, your gold, not your humanity. They built temples in your town, but not for you. They built roads, but mostly to move troops quickly in case you rebelled. They built cities, but filled them with soldiers, tax collectors, and Roman officials who looked down on you. They didn't speak your language. They didn't eat your food. They didn't care. You were useful. Until you weren't, and when you weren't, they punished your entire community. Burned villages, took slaves, raised taxes, built monuments to their own cruelty, and called it civilization. So no, you're not a citizen, and if you are, it doesn't matter. Because in the Roman Empire, status was just another word for illusion. Power didn't trickle down, it flooded upward, taking everything with it: your dignity, your labor, your children, your life. And if you're still here, if you somehow survived the shame, the labor, the violence, and the bureaucracy, congratulations, you're still one step above dirt, but not by much. Let's talk about hygiene. You've probably heard that Romans were clean, that they had bathhouses, aqueducts, and indoor plumbing, and yes, They did, but not for you, not for peasants, not for slaves, not for 90% of the population. You don't live in a villa, you live in a hut or a cramped apartment above a tavern. You don't have a private bath, you have a bucket, maybe. Public baths exist, sure, but they cost money. Not much, but more than you have, and even if you go, it's not exactly luxury. The bathhouse is crowded, loud, steamy, not with scented oils and soft towels, but with dozens of sweating bodies, questionable water, and sounds you'd rather not describe. The floors are slippery, the air is thick, people gossip, argue, scratch things, steal sandals. You try to relax, but someone sneezes on you, and then someone else pees in the corner. It's not relaxing, it's survival. Then there's the toilet. You've probably heard of the Roman latrine, a row of holes on a bench. No stalls, no privacy. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers while discussing politics or your latest trash. And when you're done, you don't get toilet paper. You get a sponge on a stick. A communal sponge. Stored in vinegar, maybe. Reused all day. If you're lucky. It doesn't have anything crawling on it. If you're not lucky, well, you'll find out in about 3 days. Now you have an infection. Congratulations, you'll probably die. But not before suffering. Let's say you cut your foot. It's small, harmless. You ignore it. Bad idea. Your foot swells, turns red. You get a fever. That's sepsis. No one knows what that means. They call the doctor. He arrives. Late, drunk and confident. He smells like fish sauce. He opens his bag. It's full of rusty tools, old rags, and herbs that might be parsley. He tells you your humors are imbalanced. You're too hot and too wet, or too cold and too dry. He's not sure, so he bleeds you, cuts your arm open and lets the blood pour into a bowl. You faint. He gives you wine. Not clean water. Just wine. You throw up. He shrugs. If the swelling doesn't go down, he recommends amputation. He doesn't have anesthesia. You bite on a piece of leather and scream. If you live, great. If not, well, it's not like anyone expected you to reach old age. Dentistry, even worse. You have a cavity. It hurts. The doctor suggests removing the tooth. There are no pliers, just metal tongs. No pain relief. Just a strong arm and some shouting. He pulls. It cracks. You pass out. The bleeding doesn't stop. Your mouth swells. You die from an infected gum. This is normal. Common. Expected. There are no hospitals. Not for the poor. Rich people have private doctors. The rest have fate. Pregnant women are even worse off. Midwives exist. But they're not trained. They guess. They hope. Sometimes they burn herbs. Sometimes they chant. Sometimes they use sharp objects. If the baby is breech, good luck. If the cord wraps around its neck, sorry. If the mother bleeds too much, no one can stop it if she screams. People tell her to be quiet. Sometimes the baby lives. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes neither of them do. You hope the gods are in a good mood. You pray to Juno, or to Fortuna, or to anyone who listen. Usually, no one does. Now let's look at disease. It's everywhere. You don't know what germs are. You don't boil your water. You don't wash your hands. You eat food covered in dust and flies. You drink from a wooden cup that hasn't been cleaned in months. You share everything: clothes, bowls, beds. Lice move freely, fleas too, and rats. They love your house. They live in the walls, under the table, next to the bread. They nibble your toes while you sleep. One day, you get a fever, then chills, then vomiting. You're weak. You lie down. You don't get up. Your family covers you with a blanket and waits. You either recover or you don't. No one knows why. Maybe the gods. Maybe bad air. Maybe something you ate. Doesn't matter, you die. They bury you quickly. They burn some incense. Life moves on. Sometimes it's plague. Real plague. Bubonic. Smallpox. Typhus. No one can stop it. People flee the cities. They abandon the sick. Temples close. Markets shut down. The air smells like rot and panic. You're told to sacrifice an animal. You do. You still die. The doctors wear no masks. They have no gloves. They touch wounds with their hands. They cut boils with bronze knives and reuse them immediately. They lick herbs to taste the balance. They recite poems while stitching. If someone dies under their care, they blame the stars, or Saturn, or the patient. Let's not forget burns. You fall into a fire, or spill hot oil, or get hit with molten lead in a construction accident. Your skin peels, blisters rise. The pain is unbearable. The doctor puts honey on it, or vinegar, or ash, then wraps it in cloth, then sends you home. The wound festers. You scream. You beg for death. Eventually, it comes, and finally, there's mental health. You're depressed. You're anxious. You have trauma. No one cares. There are no therapists, no counselors, no books. You're told to pray harder, to stop whining, to accept your fate. If you act strange, people whisper. If you hear voices, they call it possession. If you lose control, they call the priest. If you try to hurt yourself, they tie you to a post, or leave you in a room, alone, until you die. There are no support groups. No pills. Just shame, pain, and silence. So yes, Roman hygiene and medicine were advanced. If you were rich, if you were lucky, if you didn't get sick, or cut, or pregnant, or sad, but you are not rich, you are not lucky, you are the average Roman, dirty, sick, bleeding, and forgotten, and no, you wouldn't last a day. So now you're thinking maybe you'd be better off in the army. Maybe you'd get food, shelter, a sense of purpose. Maybe you'd be a hero. Spoiler. No, you wouldn't. Welcome to the Roman legions. You sign up probably because you're desperate, hungry, or just trying to avoid being arrested for stealing bread. You are not joining out of patriotism. You're joining because you have no other option. Congratulations, you now belong to the Roman state for the next 25 years. You are issued a short sword, a helmet, a rectangular shield, some chainmail, and a tunic. You are also given a pack that weighs more than your little brother. Inside it is everything you need to survive. A cooking pot, a saw, a pickaxe, a shovel, a flask, a cloak, and a grit. You march all the time, 20 miles a day, sometimes more, uphill, in sandals. You don't get a horse. You are the horse. You dig a trench every night before you sleep. Then you build a wall round your camp. Then you collapse. You don't rest. You don't complain. You train constantly, in the heat, in the cold, with full armor. You practice stabbing sacks of hay and each other. You run. You climb. You shout. Your centurion screams at you for breathing too loud. You eat barley and vinegar. Again. You sleep on the ground. Again. There's no bed. No tent. Just the sky and your doubts. If you get injured, you wrap it in cloth and keep moving. There's no medical leave. No therapist. No hugs. Just more walking. You think there will be battles, but there aren't. Most of your time is spent building roads, or digging ditches, or erecting fort walls. You are a construction worker with a sword. When a battle finally comes, you're terrified. The enemy charges. You hold your line. You stab. You scream. You see your friend's head split open next to you. You keep going. If you run, they kill you. If you stay, you might live, maybe. The air is filled with blood, sweat, and death. Your ears ring. Your hands shake. You can't breathe. But you win, sort of. Now you get to loot corpses. You take whatever they didn't ruin. A bent knife, a belt, a crust of bread, and then you bury the dead. Your friends, your enemies, yourself, inside. You return to camp. No celebration, no parade, just more marching. You might be stationed in Germania, or Britannia, or Egypt. It doesn't matter. It's all cold or hot or wet or dry. Locals hate you. They throw rocks. They spit. You don't speak their language. They don't care. You are the face of oppression. You are the empire's boot, and you are constantly reminded of it. Sometimes you guard a wall, all day. Every day, staring at trees, waiting for the barbarians who never come. Sometimes you're on patrol. You find a burned village. You report it. Nothing happens. Sometimes you escort tax shipments. People curse you. Sometimes they ambush you. Sometimes you die. If you complain, your officer punishes you. If you disobey, you're flogged. If you desert, you're executed. In front of your unit. Slowly. As a warning. Maybe you survive. 25 years. Your body is broken. Your teeth are gone. Your joints grind when you move. Your back hurts all the time. But congratulations, you get a small plot of land, probably in some swampy backwater full of mosquitoes and unfriendly locals. You try to farm. You fail. You try to rest. You can't. You have nightmares. You remember every scream, every face, every wound. No one honors you, no. Statues, no speeches, just silence. Sometimes you don't make it to retirement. The general delays payment, says there's no money, says you can wait. You riot. They send in other legions. You're crushed. You're labeled a traitor. You die hungry and confused. Your family gets nothing. If you had one, don't forget the punishments. Roman discipliners. Legendary. If one man runs from battle, the entire unit might be punished. Decimation. They line up the cohort. Every 10th man is beaten to death by the others. With clubs. You watch your friend die. Then you march like nothing happened. Because if you flinch, your necks, your armor gives you bruises. Your shield sheathes your arm. Your helmet bakes your scalp. Your feet bleed. Your hands swell. You don't complain, you obey. You survive. Maybe. Maybe not. If your unit underperforms, your general might disband it. Shame you. Send you home with nothing. You start over. At 50. With scars. With no money. With no one waiting for you. And if you die in service, your body rots in some field in Gaul, or Syria, or Numidia. No grave. No name, just another piece of the machine, discarded when broken. So no, you wouldn't enjoy being a Roman soldier. You wouldn't be brave. You wouldn't be noble. You would be exhausted, injured, traumatized, and forgotten, just like everyone else. So maybe you're thinking, okay, I won't be a peasant, a slave, or a soldier. Maybe I'll be a merchant. Maybe I'll run a little shop in Rome, sell olives or sandals, or weird clay pots no one asked for. You imagine yourself standing behind a stall, smiling at customers, counting coins, living the dream. But the Roman economy is not your friend. First of all, you don't have a shop. You rent a tiny stall in a crowded forum. It smells like fish, garlic, and disappointment. Your neighbors shout all day. One sells spoiled wine, another sells fake medicine, a third guy is just yelling about the end of the world. You can't hear your own thoughts. You wake up before sunrise. You drag your goods through the alley. You set up your stall. It starts raining. You cover everything with cloth. The wind rips the cloth. You sigh. You wait. Customers come. Some haggle. Some steal. Some just scream at you. A kid knocks over your olive jar. A dog pees on your sandals. You make 5 sestertii. Enough for some bread and half a turnip. You're thriving. And then the tax collector shows up. He's not friendly. He's not patient. He doesn't care that you had a bad day. He demands your due. You try to explain that sales were slow. He doesn't care. He wants payment now in coins. If you don't have coins, he takes goods. If you don't have goods, he takes furniture. If you don't have furniture, he takes you, or your son, or your neighbor. Someone pays, always. You think about lying. But you remember what happened to the last guy who tried that. Public flogging, then jail, then death. You pay, and now you're broke again. You try to sell better products. You travel to the port, buy spices. They cost more. You hold them back through dangerous roads. You dodge bandits. You lose a mule. You finally return. You sell a little. You think maybe things are turning round. But then someone reports you for selling with the wrong weights. You used a foreign scale. Technically illegal. Now you owe a fine. You cry. No one cares. Let's say you survive. You save a little money. You open a small taberna, a tavern. Maybe even rent a room upstairs. You serve watered wine and stale bread to drunk legionaries and angry locals. Every night someone vomits. Every night someone breaks a bench. You patch the walls. You scrub the floor. You live in the back, next to a leaking jar of pickled onions. You try to sleep. You fail. The tavern next door plays flute music until dawn. Then the baker starts hammering. Then the chickens scream. You haven't rested in 3 years. One day, an official comes in. He says you need a new license. You didn't know that. It costs money. You pay. Then another inspector arrives. He says your floor is unsafe. You must replace it. You pay again. Then someone accuses you of watering down the wine too much. You're fined. You consider jumping in the Tiber. But you have debts. And a dog. So you keep going. Maybe you try trading. You buy wool from the provinces. You sell it in the city. You pay a customs fee at the gate. then a toll, then a bribe, then another toll. By the time you reach Rome, you've lost half your profit. The market is flooded, prices are low. You make nothing. You sleep in a warehouse, surrounded by rats. One bites your toe. You get a fever. You still go to work. You collapse behind a stack of clay amphorae. Someone drags you outside. You wake up in an alley. Someone took your shoes and your wallet. You laugh. It sounds like a death rattle. Trade in the Roman Empire is not glorious. It's hard. It's slow. It's dangerous. The roads are long. The carts are heavy. The weather is cruel. Ships sink. Pirates steal. Bandits ambush. Markets crash, and if you make money, the state notices and takes it, and then you start again. If you fail, you beg, or starve, or die. There is no bailout, no safety net, no second chance. You are the backbone of commerce, and the empire has a history of breaking backs. Maybe you go into banking. You lend money. You charge interest. People hate you. Some don't pay. You send in forces. You get stabbed or sued, arrested. And if things really go wrong, the emperor cancels all debts. Because he wants to be popular, you lose everything overnight. No refund, no apology, just ruin. Maybe you get clever. You start forging coins, mixing silver with lead. It works for a while, until someone notices. Now you're branded, or executed, or both. They melt your fake coins, pour them down your throat. It's symbolic and painful. Maybe you try to avoid all that. Live quietly. Sell bread. Keep your head down. But even then, disaster finds you. A fire breaks out. Your stall burns. No insurance. No help. Just ash. Or a riot. Or a plague. Or a new emperor who bans your profession because his astrologer said bread is cursed. You close shop. You weep. You give up. The market doesn't care. It keeps moving, with or without you. So no, you wouldn't thrive as a merchant. You wouldn't get rich. You wouldn't climb the ladder. You'd sell stale figs to drunks until your heart gives out. And then someone else would take your place, and no one would remember your name. Let's talk about Roman entertainment. Maybe, after all the pain, poverty, and parasites, you think you deserve a little fun, some leisure, a good laugh. Maybe you've heard of the Colosseum. The games, the drama, the theater. Sounds exciting. Sounds like a break from your miserable life. It's not. You walk to the amphitheater with thousands of others. It's loud, crowded, smells like sweat, urine, and old wine. You squeeze into a seat made of stone. It's hot. There's no shade unless you're rich. You're not rich. You're in the top row, where the wind carries the smell of roasted animals and burned flesh. You're here for the games, which is a polite word for organized murder. It begins with exotic animals, lions, elephants, crocodiles. They're starved, beaten, and released into the arena to fight prisoners. The crowd cheers. You pretend you're cheering too. But your stomach turns. Then the gladiators come out. You think they're heroes. They're not. They're mostly slaves, some criminals, some poor fools who thought this was their ticket to fame. They fight because they have no choice. Some die quickly, some slowly. The sand turns red. The sun keeps shining. You shield your eyes. A man screams for mercy. The crowd boos. The emperor gives the thumbs down. The man dies. You're supposed to clap. You don't want to. But you do. Because if you don't, someone notices. You don't want to be noticed. After the blood, there's more blood. Naval battles staged in flooded arenas. Executions of traitors, staged like Greek tragedies. People burned alive while dressed as mythological characters. You're told it's culture. It's art. It's for the glory of Rome. But it feels like horror. You go home shaken. You say nothing. You drink. You try to forget. The theater isn't better. It's chaotic. The plays are long. The jokes are crude. The audience is drunk. People yell at actors, throw food. The performance stops 3 times because someone's donkey got loose. A man behind you tries to sell you magic herbs. A woman in front of you won't stop coughing. The story makes no sense. Jupiter disguises himself as a goose to seduce someone's wife while Mercury juggles apples. Everyone laughs. You don't. You fake a smile. You leave before it ends. Then there are festivals. Days off. Free bread. Free wine. Parades. Sounds great. But you still work. Because if you don't, you fall behind. The festivals are crowded, noisy, dangerous, thieves everywhere, soldiers watching for unrest. Someone starts a fire. You run. You lose your sandal. You lose your bag. You lose your patience. You go home empty-handed and exhausted. And then there's religion. You go to the temple. You kneel. You burn incense. You whisper prayers to Jupiter, Mars, Venus. Whoever might be listening, you beg for health or food. Or just one day without pain. Nothing happens. You try different gods. Maybe Isis. Maybe Mithras. Maybe the emperor himself, since he's declared divine. You bow to a statue while the real man taxes you to death. The priests tell you the gods are angry. You wonder what you did wrong. Was it the sponge you forgot to rinse? The barley you spilled? The angry thought you had during the games? You offer another coin. You light another candle. Still nothing. Your neighbor gets sick. Your wife loses another pregnancy. Your roof collapses. You start to think maybe the gods aren't real. But you don't say it out loud. Because if you do, someone might report you. And then you're an atheist. And that's illegal. The empire doesn't like questions. It likes obedience. The temples are full of gold. You're not allowed near it. You sit outside with the other poor people, waiting for a priest to notice you. He doesn't. He's too busy blessing a senator's new statue. You go home. Again. Alone. Again. Still. Hungry. Again. You think about joining a cult. They're everywhere. Secret rituals. Mysterious chants. Promises of salvation. They say pain is an illusion. That life is preparation for the next world. That your suffering has meaning. You want to believe it. You drink the sacred wine. You sing the hymns. You try to feel something. You don't, you leave. Quietly. No one stops you. Later, the cult gets outlawed. The members are arrested. You burn the robes you bought and pretend it never happened. So entertainment, religion, and public life are not escapes. They're just different flavors of control. You're told what to enjoy, what to believe, how to act. If you stray, you suffer. If you comply, you still suffer. But maybe you find something simple. You sing while working. You share a joke with a friend. You see your child smile. Brief moments, fleeting, fragile. And then they're gone. Replaced by another tax, another injury, another loss. And you keep going. Because you have no choice. Because Rome doesn't care about your feelings. Rome cares about your labor, your obedience, and your silence. You are not a citizen of greatness. You are a spectator of cruelty. And no, you still wouldn't last a day. Let's talk about food. Because maybe you think, if nothing else, at least the Romans ate well. They had banquets, feasts, grapes, wine, roasted pigs, and exotic dishes you see in the paintings. You've heard the myths, but none of that is for you. You don't get grapes on a platter. You don't get honey-glazed dormice. You don't even get meat unless something dies in front of you and no one else wants it. Your diet is barley porridge. Again. And again. And again. Sometimes you add lentils. Or chickpeas. If you're lucky, there's cabbage. Boiled until it tastes like wet sadness. Olive oil if you can afford it, which you can't. You drink water from a public fountain that tastes like nettle and moss. Or you drink cheap wine, watered down until it's basically sour grape juice. Not to relax, to stay alive. Because the water might make you sick, but the wine only makes you dizzy. You don't have breakfast. You have a handful of leftovers, if you're a laborer. You might get some bread. It's hard, dense, black with ash. It breaks your teeth. If you're a slave, you eat last. After everyone else. You scrape the pot. You lick the spoon. You eat crusts. You say thank you. Dinner is more of the same. Barley mash. Maybe a bit of fish sauce if you're splurging. The fish sauce is called garum. It smells like a corpse in the sun. It's made by fermenting fish guts in vats for weeks. The rich love it. You ate it, but it's cheap and salty and covers the taste of mold. You eat it anyway. You can't afford to be picky. You can't afford anything. Meat is for the upper class. Maybe you see it at festivals. Roasted boar sausages. Gimbirds. You smell it from your bench. You watch others eat it. You chew your cabbage slower and pretend it tastes like roast goose. It doesn't. You grow some herbs. Thyme. Mint. But only to hide the rot. Your grain is often full of stones and bugs. You pick them out. Or you don't crunch. You try to farm your own food. The soil is bad. The weather worse. Drought. Flood. Hail. Locusts. Your barley fails. You try again. Your neighbor has a goat. You dream about that goat. Not to eat. To trade. But he guards it like treasure. Because it is treasure. Milk, cheese. Maybe meat if it dies. You steal some milk. He sees you. You argue. He tells the magistrate. Now you owe a fine. You can't pay. You lose your cooking pot. Now you eat from a broken bowl. Congratulations. You've gone backwards. You hear about exotic foods. Peacocks. Flamingos. Ostrich eggs. Jellyfish. You will never eat them. You're not in a villa. You're in a shed. There are no banquets. There is no reclining on cushions while slaves bring you trays of figs and eels. You sit on a stool, hunched over a pot, praying it doesn't boil over. The firewood is damp. The stew is watery. Your stomach growls anyway. If you get sick from food, which you will, there's nothing you can do. Spoiled fish, rancid oil, bread with mold. You eat it all. Because hunger is worse. Diarrhea follows. You miss work. Your boss beats you. You keep going. You don't have a choice. You might try to hunt. But the forests are controlled, owned by elites. If you're caught trapping rabbits, you're punished. If you fish in the wrong stream, you're fined. Everything is owned. Nothing is free. You gather wild herbs. You chew tree bark. You boil wheats. You feed your children first. You pretend you're full. You're not. You never are. Maybe you try to preserve food, dry it, salt it, but salt is expensive. You trade for it. You get a bag full of rocks. You complain. The merchant laughs. You eat the rocks anyway, not on purpose, but they're in the grain. Again, you chip a tooth. You spit blood. You go back to chewing slowly. You attend a public feast once. A festival. The emperor paid for it. Free bread. Free wine. You think maybe this is the turning point. You grab to loaves. Someone punches you. A soldier shoves you. You fall. You lose a sandal. The bread is gone. The wine spills. You get nothing. Again. You go home and eat cold lentils. You pretend it's funny. It isn't. If you're a child, it's worse. No snacks, no sweets, no fruit unless it grows nearby. And you're fast enough to grab it before the birds do. Your parents feed you boiled barley until you hate the smell of life. If you're a woman, you cook all day. You fetch water. You grind grain. You stir pots. You feed others. You ate last. If anything's left. Sometimes you chew on burnt crust and call it dinner. Sometimes you go to bed hungry. You dream of figs. You wake up to barley. You always wake up to barley. You try to save seeds for next season. But rats get them, or mold. Or your husband sells them to pay a tax. Now you have to beg your neighbor. Again. She gives you a handful. You cry. You plant. You hope. So food isn't comfort. It's survival, belly. And if you think you'd enjoy Roman cuisine, you wouldn't, because you wouldn't taste it. You'd shovel it down while working, sweating, rushing, because someone is yelling at you to hurry, because you're late, because you're lazy, because you're not eating fast enough, because you're not dying fast enough. You dream of full plates, warm soup, a fresh loaf, a moment of peace. You don't get it. You get barley. You get lentils. You get hunger. And maybe, if you're lucky, a date that's not full of worms. So no, you wouldn't last a day. Let's talk about crime. Maybe you think Rome was safe, that the roads were patrolled, the laws enforced, and justice served by noblemen in togas. But you'd be wrong. Rome was dangerous. All the time, everywhere, especially if you were poor, alone, or slightly slower than the man running beside you. Theft was constant. You left your sandals. Unattended. They disappeared. You looked away from your coin purse. It vanished. You tried to hold onto both. Someone held a knife to your ribs. You let go. That was your choice. Your money or your spleen. Pick one. And it wasn't just strangers. Your neighbor might rob you. Your friend might lie to you. Your landlord definitely cheats you. Everyone is trying to survive. Honor doesn't mean much when you're hungry. And even if you caught the thief, then what? The courts didn't care about you. You couldn't afford a lawyer. You couldn't even read the laws. The judges were appointed by the elite. The elite didn't care if someone stole your 3 copper coins and half a cabbage. You complained. They yawned. You left empty-handed again. If you were rich, you had protection. Bodyguards. Influence. Bribes. If someone wronged you, you could have them punished. publicly, brutally. If you were poor, you had nothing. The law didn't protect you. It controlled you. You stepped out of line. You got punished. Not with a warning, with a whip, or a brand, or crucifixion, for stealing a loaf of bread, for looking at someone the wrong way, for existing without permission. You could be beaten in the street and no one would stop it. You could be killed in an alley and no one would investigate. The guards would shrug, say you shouldn't have been there, say you brought it on yourself. The city had a police force, sort of. The cohorts urbae kept order, but mostly they protected property, not people. If you were rich, they showed up. If not, they didn't. And then there were the vigils, the night watchmen. Their main job was putting out fires, but sometimes they patrolled. Sometimes they stopped fights. Sometimes they started them. If they caught you out late, they asked questions. If they didn't like your answers, they hit you. If you hit back, you disappeared. And even if you avoided the city, the countryside wasn't better. Bandits roamed the roads, travel was slow. You didn't have a carriage, you walked, with all your belongings tied to your back, which made you a perfect target. You begged to share someone's fire. They nodded, then stole your shoes while you slept. You screamed, they laughed. The nearest town was 30 miles away. You limped, barefoot, bleeding. You passed a patrol, asked for help. They told you to move along. They had better things to do. There was no safe space, no sanctuary, no place where you could sit, breathe, and not worry that someone was watching your bag, or your wife, or your sheep. You kept your head down. You locked your door, if you had one. You prayed the gods would protect you. They didn't. Maybe you tried to protect yourself. A knife, a club. But weapons required money. And using one meant risk. If you killed a man, even in defense, you were on trial. If he was wealthier, you were guilty. If he had friends, you were guilty. If you had nothing, you were guilty. The punishment wasn't prison. Rome didn't like prisons. They liked pain. You could be flogged until your back opened like an overripe melon. You could be branded with hot iron, a letter carved into your skin. F for fugitivus, T for thief, C for condemned. You could be mutilated, fingers cut, ears sliced, nose broken permanently, so people would know what you did, and avoid you, or mock you, or just finish the job. If you were really unlucky, you were sent to the mines. The salt mines. The silver mines. You worked until your lungs collapsed. Until your legs gave out. Until the rock fell on you and no one noticed. No one mourned. You were replaced by the next prisoner. Or the next slave. Or the next person who looked suspicious and had no alibi. And the worst crimes. The ones the state didn't punish. They did themselves. The emperor's men could seize your land, take your daughter, arrest you for nothing, claim it was for the good of Rome. You couldn't appeal. You couldn't resist. You disappeared. Your house was sold. Your name forgotten. The city moved on. It always did. And even if you followed every law, paid every tax, obeyed every command, you still weren't safe. Because someone richer could lie about you, say you insulted the emperor, say you practiced sorcery, say you failed to sacrifice to the gods, and suddenly, you were the criminal. You were dragged through the forum. You were flogged. You were hanged. Or worse, you were sentenced to the arena, fed to beasts, torn apart for sport. While people cheered, drank, laughed. Your final moments, background noise for someone else's party. So no, you wouldn't find justice in Rome. You wouldn't feel safe. You wouldn't report a crime. You'd keep your mouth shut. You'd lock your door. You'd sleep lightly. And you'd hope desperately that no one noticed you. Because in the Roman Empire, the best defense wasn't strength, it was invisibility. Let's talk about housing. Maybe you imagine yourself in a cozy Roman home. A courtyard, a fountain, some ivy climbing the walls. Maybe a cat naps by the doorway while you sip wine and chat about philosophy. You're wrong. That's a villa. That's for the rich. You don't live there. You live in an insula. That's a Roman apartment block. 4, 5, even 6 stories high. Made of brick, wood, and wishful thinking. It sways in the wind. It creaks when you breathe. It leaks when it rains. You climb narrow stairs to reach your floor. There's no elevator, no handrail. The stairs are slippery with grease and soot. You trip once, you limp for a month. Your room is one space. No kitchen, no toilet, no privacy. Just a straw mattress, a cracked pot, and the smell of a dozen people living too close together. You hear everything, every cough, every argument, every unholy thing your upstairs neighbors are doing with their furniture at midnight. You can't complain. You just listen and smell. Because the walls are thin and the waste buckets overflow. Your toilet is a pot. You empty it into the street. So does everyone else. The road becomes a river. A slow, warm, fragrant river. You step carefully. You never wear your good sandals. Not that you have good sandals. If you're on the top floor, your rent is cheaper. Because it's more dangerous. The roof leaks. The walls shake. The fire gets there last. But when it does, you're trapped. No escape. Just heat, smoke, and regret. Fires are common. Everything burns. Everything's dry. A single lamp tips over, and half the street is ash by morning. The vigils come. Sometimes too late. They blame you. They fine you. You don't have money. They take your door. You prop up a curtain. It gets stolen. Now you sleep behind a stack of crates. You start again. If you're on the ground floor, you're luckier, slightly. Your ceiling leaks instead of your roof. Your room floods. Rats live in your firewood, cockroaches in your blanket. You see a centipede longer than your foot. You name it. You cry. You move on. You don't have running water. You carry it from a public fountain to clay jugs every morning. Sometimes they break. You curse Jupiter. He doesn't respond. You try to fix the leak in your wall. The plaster crumbles. You stuff it with straw-dotted molds. You get sick. You cough for 3 months. You can't afford a doctor. You chew mint. It doesn't help. Your landlord doesn't care. He hasn't visited in years. He sends a collector. You pay or you leave. You leave. Now you live even farther from the city center. The roads are worse. The smell is stronger. The rats bolder. You try to decorate. A cloth on the wall. A broken cup as a vase. Your friend visits. He brings a stool. You now onto seats. You feel rich. For an hour. Then he tells you his building collapsed. 6 people died. 1 was a child. You nod. You go quiet. You both stare at the wall. It shifts slightly. You don't mention it. You sleep. You dream of a real home. You wake up to dripping water and a cold wind slicing through the cracks. Maybe you're a laborer. You leave at dawn. Return at dusk. You track in mud. Your clothes are stiff with dust and sweat. You collapse. You don't even eat. You stare at the ceiling. A spider descends. You say goodnight to it. It's your only roommate that doesn't snore. Maybe you're a woman. You spend the day washing, cooking, scrubbing, hauling. You care for children, elders, sick husbands. You have no time to rest. Your back aches. Your fingers crack. You sit down. The bench collapses. You laugh until you cry. Then you just cry. Maybe you try to escape the city. Move to the countryside. Fresh air, open space, fewer neighbors. You find a small hovel. It's cheap because it's falling apart. The roof is straw. The walls are dirt. The wind enters from all sides. In summer, you sweat. In winter, you freeze. You stuff the gaps with whatever you can find. Rags, mud, hope, none of it works. The wind keeps howling. The mice keep chewing. Your candle blows out every 10 minutes. You give up. You go to bed in the dark. You dream of warmth. You wake up shivering. You wonder why you moved. Then you remember your last building burned down. You didn't die. Just lost everything again. So housing isn't a refuge. It's a hazard. A lottery. A gamble you always lose. You live in fear of fire, of collapse, of eviction, of plague. You don't decorate. You don't plan. You just try to keep the roof over your head and your mattress out of the mud. And if you think this doesn't sound that bad, remember, your mattress has fleas. Your pillow is a folded cloth. Your blanket smells like mildew. The floor is dirt. The ceiling leaks. The walls mold. Your neighbor sings badly. The rats dance at night. And your front door is a curtain, if you have one. So no, you wouldn't last a day. Not in a Roman home. Because Roman homes weren't homes. They were survival boxes stacked on top of each other, filled with the noise, waste, and breath of 1,000 strangers just as miserable as you. So maybe now you're thinking, all right, being paused. But what if I was rich, a senator, a noble, one of those smug guys in a white toga with a smug expression and many rings? Surely that was better. Spoiler, it wasn't. It was just a different flavor of miserable. First of all, if you were born into a senatorial family, congratulations. Your entire life is a performance. Every day, forever. You wake up before dawn. Not because you want to, but because if you're not the first one at the forum, someone else is. And they'll take your influence, your connections, and probably your clients. Yes, clients. Because being elite in Rome means managing an entourage of desperate men who show up at your door every morning to beg for favors, money, or scraps of power. You smile. You shake hands. You lie. You promise things you can't deliver. You hate every second of it. Then you dress carefully. Every fold in your toga matters. If it's crooked, someone gossips. If it's dirty, someone sneers. If it's too clean, someone accuses you of trying too hard. Then you head to the Senate. You sit on a marble bench for 6 hours while old men argue about taxes, roads, and whose cousin insulted whose goat. Nothing gets done. Everyone talks. No one listens. You pretend to care. You don't. But if you nod off, someone sees. They write about it. They tell others, rumors spread. Now people think you're lazy, or weak, or not loyal to the emperor. That's the real danger, the emperor, because every senator lives in fear of saying the wrong thing, wearing the wrong color, associating with the wrong poet. The emperor might be in a good mood, or he might decide your hairstyle is treasonous. You don't know. You never know. One day you're invited to dinner, the next day you're accused of conspiracy. You end up bleeding in your bathtub, your estate seized, your name erased. Maybe you try to stay neutral, avoid politics. That's suspicious too. Everyone is expected to praise the emperor, support the system, applaud the games, sacrifice to the right gods. If you don't, someone notices, someone reports, someone smiles too much when you're dragged away. And yes, you're rich. You have a villa, with walls, a garden, slaves. But it's not peace. It's a trap. You have to host banquets all the time. You spend fortunes on food you don't even like, just to impress people you secretly despise. Peacocks, eels, jellyfish in sauce. Everything has to be perfect. If your catch is too firm, it's an insult. If the wine is too old, it's an offense. If someone gets sick, it's a scandal. So you spend all day supervising cooks, florists, musicians, dancers. You smile. You pretend to enjoy it. You wait for it to end. Then you do it again tomorrow. Because if you stop, they say you've gone mad, or poor or treasonous. Maybe you try to relax. You visit your country estate. You hunt. You read scrolls. You take a bath. And then a messenger arrives. The emperor wants you back. There's a new decree, a new council, a new enemy. You pack, you ride, you obey. You always obey. Because disobedience means death. Not quickly, slowly, publicly. One accusation and you're done. Your slaves turn on you. Your friends pretend they never met you. Your family is exiled. Your statues are pulled down, and people cheer. Because they have to. You think about resisting, about speaking truth, about standing for something. Then you remember Cicero, and Seneca, and dozens of other names that ended up headless in the forum. You keep quiet. You write flattering letters. You pretend to enjoy poetry about how great the emperor's nose is. You survive. Barely. Your wife hates you. Your children disappoint you. Your slaves steal from you. Your ulcers bleed. You drink too much. You don't sleep. You fake. Smiles. You host parties. You draft laws. You betray friends. You flatter enemies. You worry. All the time. About who's watching, who's whispering, who's planning your fall. You build walls round your villa. You hire guards. You avoid eye contact. You feel nothing. You are nothing. Just another moving part in a machine that eats people, no matter how rich they are. So no, even if you were rich, powerful, and Roman, you still wouldn't last a day, because Rome doesn't care about wealth, or talent, or tradition. Rome only cares about Rome. And Rome is a hungry god that never says thank you. It just takes over and over, until there's nothing left but marble ruins, broken names, and quiet warnings carved in stone. And that's why you wouldn't last a day in the Roman Empire. Not as a peasant, not as a slave, not as a soldier, merchant, craftsman, senator, or even a bored noble in a marble villa. You would suffer. You would break. You would wonder what went wrong. as rats chewed your last piece of barley bread and a tax collector asked if you had any more fingers to give. Because Rome was not built for you. It was built for Rome. It wasn't a golden age. It was a very long, very bureaucratic disaster that ran on blood, labor, fear, and public toilets. You might admire the aqueducts, the arches, the roads, the Latin inscriptions on broken stone. But behind every monument was a worker who died lifting it, and a manager who took the credit. Behind every great general was 100 dead soldiers who didn't even get a name. Behind every bust in a museum is a person who probably starved, burned, or bled out so their emperor could look fancy. You wouldn't be the exception. You wouldn't be the genius inventor who revolutionized concrete. You wouldn't be the lucky one who owned land and kept it. You wouldn't be the gladiator who became a legend. You'd be the one watching from the crowd, coughing up dust, trying not to faint from hunger, hoping no one noticed that your tunic had been patched 3 times with someone else as funeral cloth. And no, the Romans didn't speak English. So you'd be confused, insulted, and possibly executed before you could even figure out how to ask where the toilet was. You'd be in pain. All the time. From infections. From food poisoning. From blisters, bad shoes, bad air, and bad luck. And no one would help you. Because there was no help. There was just Rome. Big, loud, cruel, and full of statues of people who never cared about you. But hey, at least they had nice corns until inflation ruined that too. So, if you ever feel nostalgic for ancient Rome, if you ever wish you were born in a toga and walked the streets of the Forum, but this, you'd probably have dysentery, a hernia, no teeth, and a very short future. But don't worry. You're not in the Roman Empire. You're just watching a video about it, probably in bed, probably safe, probably clean. Congratulations, you've already lasted longer than you would have in real life.